This lecture is being recorded. And at this point, we can start talking about Omniauth. So Omniauth is now a really big thing. I'm sure you have all seen, like you've all started to log in with Google to things rather than creating new passwords for every individual website you go to. If you haven't, it's freeing. It's awesome. Just knowing that you've got you just have to sign into Google. Really nice often. It's a good user experience. You don't have to worry about as many passwords. And it's really popular and getting easier to do. Now, and like logging in with, you can log in with Google, you can log in with Facebook, now you can log in with Twitch, GitHub, whatever. So helpful thing. It's also really helpful as a developer, because every password that you don't have to store in your database is one less person whose password you're risking. You're like responsible for like less people's well-being if you are using Omniauth rather than your own stuff to make things work, right? So by putting the blame on Facebook or Google for any password leaks, we end up better off and safer as developers. So today I'm going to be showing you how to implement Omniauth into the application that we built last time. I think I'm using the non-Devise version of our web page, but I kind of like pulled in some of our like CSS. So I'm just going to share it. We all will remember this bad boy, right? I bet I have Batman. Yep, and now we've got the denied.com. We can start faving things. It'll toggle down if we favorited it before. It'll toggle up if we haven't. Cool. We cool with how this is working? We all remember this? So this is going to be another lecture where it is largely me walking through the instructions in a README. So if you didn't sign up for that this week, eventually we will go back to normal. But the way that you find out like how to use Omniauth, like you could implement it all yourself, but almost always there's a gem to allow you to an Omniauth implementation for whichever website you try to do. For now, I'm going to use Google. I'm going to use Google's Omniauth, and that's what we're going to be doing for this webpage. And I'm going to just Google Omniauth Rails, right? And the first thing that comes up is fine with me. I'm happy with it. It's just a gem that we can add that will allow us to start implementing Omniauth in Rails. So I'm going to start going through this README just the same way that that I did yesterday. So the first thing it asks is that we get an API key from the Google API console. I'm going to open that up. Great. I think this one's currently empty. Might move you all for a second. Where's my little... Let me open this. I'll just create a new project. Why not? That's actually more fair. Cool. So I'm going to create a project. I'm going to call this Omniauth lecture. I'm going to create this. I'm going to view it. Awesome. And basically, my goal is to select my project, go to credentials, then select the OAuth consent screen, blah, blah, blah. Let's just go over here. There's actually a different thing that I'm used to, but there we go, the APIs section. So I'm going to say, hey, or what did you tell me? This seems important. Enable APIs and services. No, this actually seems less important than I thought. Credentials, there we go. Create credentials. this is where I want to be, right? I'm going to start creating an OAuth client ID, which is what it says. But annoyingly doesn't say over here. This is important though. We do need this OAuth client ID. Cool. So let's go to the OAuth consent screen. And now we can now just like navigate through this, right? Basically it's saying, hey, who do you want to allow? Only users within our organization or anyone with a Google account. This is definitely an anyone with a Google account or situation. I don't think anyone is on our webpage already. So here I can now start creating my app, and it says in this little README that we need to provide an email address and a product name. Cool. So I'm going to call this Omniauth lecture, and my email is already here. Please do not email me at this address. And then basically, some of you may feel like we need to add something right now. You might be correct. But right now, I'm just going to do this and see what we can get. So now we've got this credentials page. We can start like getting our actual client key and client secret. Just going to create this. And now here's the stuff that I need, right? This is looking like the client key and client secret that they suggest that I eventually use. If this seemed like I was just kind of clicking through stuff, this is like a lot of this is just navigating through menus and like getting to the point where you have a client ID and a client secret. I could go a little bit more depth, but it's honestly just a matter of clicking around, and you've all signed up for web pages before. It is a little bit messy though, and I recognize that. But I'm going to copy this, right? Now, when I see a client ID and a client secret, what should I start immediately thinking about?
Putting it in a place where it won't be pushed up to GitHub.
That is correct. So if you've worked through this, or if you remember in Sinatra, there was a .env gem that I love to use. And that is going to be helpful for us. I'm just going to Google it really quickly. Basically, what .env does is it creates a little file where we can store environmental variables that we can then use throughout our app. It's available right here. It's a very widely used gem for going through APIs. But I'm just going to follow their instructions. I'm going to add this to my gem file. Only under development and test. When you enter production, the way you set environmental variables is going to be different. Like Heroku will have a portal that will allow you to set environmental variables. When you're in development, usually you have to like do something like this. Before I do this, before I've even bundled, I want to show you Rails C. There is an environment that has a lot of keys in it. There's an env file. What the hell? Did I already do this? Okay, let's get rid of this. Right, I deleted everything that was being committed to GitHub, but since this wasn't, I'm gonna like add this so again. Basically the way env works is it's a little file that I put at the root directory of my app. So not in a nested folder, I just say create a file called .env. I can role play doing that again. So we can delete this. Yes. The way I do that is touch.env. Great. Now it is in my root folder. I add it to my gitignore. Let's probably put it at the bottom. And this says, hey, don't push this up to GitHub, please. If you miss this step, you will get hacked, and it won't be my fault. And now that I've got this, basically anything that any key value pair that I write in my .env file will be available by calling it like this. So if I create something called S3 bucket equals this, right, then env at a key of S3 bucket will resolve to your S3 bucket. And S3 bucket is something that Amazon has. But bloop, bloop, bloop. I'm going to now close this out because we've got everything that we need to make this work. I'm going to say env, or sorry, I'm going to say Batman equals cheese, right? Now if I bundle install to make sure that this gem is available, I go Rails C. I can now say env at a key of Batman. The key of Batman? What did I do wrong? This is strange and unusual at the same time. Oh, no, there it is. env at a key of Batman. Great. Okay, cool. Yeah, need to bundle install, restart my console. So now we're going to exit this. Let's make sure that this bad boy is also exited. I can now use this to do something useful rather than just say Batman equals cheese, right? So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to say Google client ID equals, I'm going to say Google client secret equals, and then copy this. And now anywhere in my app, when I start this up, I will have access to env at a key of Google client ID. And just a suggestion, whenever you set up your .env file for the first time and you've gotten your git ignore and you've written this down, try it out in Rails console. Because I think a lot of students see the error where it's just suddenly like, my fetch request sent, or like my request to this sent over Google client secret rather than the string, and they won't notice it until it's too late and they've asked me a question after getting lost for an hour. So like everything, once you add it, figure out a way to test it. Cool. So now that we've got this .env file, we can go back to making this work. So I'm just going to walk through their suggestions for how to use this. It says, cool, grab this, set this up. And it says now that once I do this, once I like add this to a config.initializer/omniauth.rb, so I'm going to go over here and create that file. Boop, boop. I'm going to create something called, according to their suggestion, omniauth.rb in this initializers thing. Sorry, omniauth.rb. Let's spell that correctly. And now I can just copy this in. And now when Rails initializes, it's going to initialize with this new setting for Omniauth Builder. And I'm going to check to make sure that this works. And I get this error, right, that says uninitialized constant Omniauth. The reason for that is because this needs to be in my gem file. So I'm going to do that. So it says like Omniauth, we don't know what that is, but the moment I put in my gem file, it will. Cool. Oops, did I just close that window instead of alt tabbing. Just being like, done, cool, end of lecture. That's in the gem file. Cool. Run this. Boop. And now, ideally, if I run Rails S, it's no longer going to give me that error. Cool. So just to check up on that, right? All I'm saying is, hey, there's for this middleware that's called like Omniauth Builder, which you have because that's the gem, right? So the gem probably defines some sort of method called Omniauth with some sort of module called Builder. And we said, hey, in this provider, we've got this Google OAuth 2 with these env files, and that will allow our gem to do the work that it wants to do. And what it says is you can now access the Google Auth 2 URL. And this is the one thing I dislike about this README is how buried this is. This is the big part. This is the part that brings you to Google. So I'm going to really quickly now first check to make sure I'm not missing anything. Cool. Yeah. So that's basically all I need to get started here. I'm going to go back over to my views, right? First, I'm going to check to make sure my app is still working. Bloop. I'm going to log out. And now right here, I would love you are not logged out, log in, or sign up. I would love to have that say, or log in with Google. And then maybe like throw in an Oxford comma there rather than having two or statements. Cool, views. Forget where I wrote this, so here we are. You are not logged in. Log in, sign up, or, nope. I'll write this over here. No, I'm not. I have a, no, yes, I am. Cool. Link to, and I'm just going to copy this link. I'm going to paste it right here. Now, some of these Omniauth gems will give you a route helper that allows you to not just write auth/Google_OAuth2. Somewhere in the gem, they're defining what this route does for you. They're compiling it. But if I just write this, it's actually going to work, and I'm going to show you. Boop. Log in with Google. And now I get a new error, but I'm getting to Google, right? This isn't just a made-up route. And it says, the redirect URI in this request, blah, 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 this bad boy right here, does not match the ones authorized for the OAuth client. To update the authorized redirect URIs, visit this. So I'm going to do it. And now we're back to error-driven development, right? I'm just going to copy this. Now, authorized redirect URIs. I'm going to paste this. Cool. We all see what I just did there? I just listened to Google. Google said, hey, I don't know where this, like, I haven't authorized this place before. You're just sending me a random OAuth, like, request from nowhere. This does not match any of your API keys. And so I was being like, no. I'm the one who owns this API key. It is cool to accept requests from this website. Cool? Are we uncomfortable with this? How many people have I lost so far? Everyone? Was Chris raising his hand there, or is that? Yeah, I'm only seeing half of you at a time too. So, but how are we feeling so far? Right now, I'm just following the instructions. And the one thing that I've given you that I don't think is explicitly obvious in this README is that this link is going to now be available on our webpage to go to Google, right? So I don't think this shows up in Rails/info/routes Google, which is weird. And I'm wondering why this gem does it that way. But it works. So we're going to Google, right? And I'm going to now go back over here, try this again. Log out, whoops. I'm going to like click this. And now we get this. Does anyone know what this does, what this means? Can anyone walk me through fixing this error?
You probably need to add that route into your routes folder.
Yeah, we need to create a route. Cool. So I'm going to go over to my config /routes. This is messy. This is shameful. I shouldn't be doing this now. I'm gonna, but yeah, if this breaks, we'll solve that later. Cool. And I'm just gonna say, hey, if I get a GET request from Google, right? I'm going to now do something, right? Now, where do we think we want to send this?
The index?
The index? So actually, what we're trying to do right here, I'd argue, is like when we're logging in with Google, the one thing we know we're doing is we're creating a session. So it definitely should be in the sessions controller. There's a couple of choices we can now make, right? Like first off, we have to decide, hey, if they say click sign in with Google, and they're not on our webpage, do we just want to sign them up? And I say yes. It'll be the most seamless flow. There's also this thing where because arguably they're like creating a new session, we might want to go to sessions #create. I've seen it done both ways where it's like sessions #create and sessions #create with Omniauth or something. Both of these are fine. Create might be more restful, but if we take a look at our sessions controller right now, you'll see that this is already pretty clogged. And I don't want to like have a 30-line long session or like method in my sessions controller. So in my case, I think having its own method would make everything much easier to read. But I've seen this done both ways, where this Omniauth redirects to def create and where it redirects to its separate session. I've even seen I think Devise, when you use Omniauth with it, creates a helper controller specifically for Omniauth. So there's no, like, this is truly the Reese's peanut butter cup of routes. There's no wrong way to do it. There are many wrong ways to do that. I'm going to walk that one back hard. But as long as you can justify being like, hey, this should be in sessions because we're creating a session. And I want to extract this to a separate method to separate concerns. If you say that, you're good. You, as a developer, have thought about it and you've come to the right conclusion. That's my justification. We all cool with that? Cool. I'm going to say to create sessions create with Omniauth. I don't need a route for this. I don't need a route helper because ideally I don't want anyone else posting to this. I want only Google talking to me through this. So I'm going to right over here, def create with Omniauth. it might be helpful to say like create with Google Omniauth, right? But then I'm just gonna put a bybug right here because we're about to have to do a lot of Google stuff. Cool. So I'm gonna go back. Bloop, bloop. This is gonna redirect me. I'm gonna hit log in with Google again. I'm gonna go over here. And now, what? What? Why did I go to sessions new? Anyone know what this bug says? What this tells us?
Do you have a before action with logging in?
Yep.
You should skip that method then.
That's a good idea. Filter chain halted as authorized, rendered, or redirected. So here we go. Does everyone see what just happened there? Because that was a quick piece of debugging from all of us. What it could have been me just scratching my head for 5 minutes. Yeah, so what we're doing is we have this like authorized method that we've discussed before, and we are now skipping it again. Cool. Gonna try this one more time. Log in with Google. Go over here. And now this is spinning in the classic bybug fashion of like Google is just waiting on my poor little app to like send it back something. Cool. So I'm now going to look at it. This is where going back to the documentation is very important, because it's going to describe how I use this. It says that there is a bunch of information available in this right here. Usually we would be using something called params that we're all familiar with. Params has some keys. It even has some new keys from Google, right? But it doesn't actually have any of the information I really want. It's just sent over some random info about how this is the Google API. There's some weird state. There's some weird code. It's not what I want. What the documentation says is we access everything by going to request.env at a key of Omniauth. Now, does anyone know what request is in this context? Has anyone typed request into a controller before? Does anyone want to? Cool. So params are actually a small part of a request, right? If we think about what params are, like what we're saying is, hey, these are a couple of different parts of the request that we just got sent over from a computer that relate to some data that we need, right? So Rails will put /6, like an ID right here in our params. It'll parse a query string for us and put it in our params. It'll also take data from a form and put it in our params. But those together make up a really small part of a website request. If I actually want anything else that's not in the params about this request, I can ask Rails to give me the request. And then wait a while, because that's a lot of information right here. That includes this Omniauth auth hash, which I just happened to scroll up to, but also includes a crazy amount of other stuff. A really crazy amount of other stuff. Like a really crazy amount of other stuff. This isn't even the whole thing. It stopped printing. I'm going to say, like, we can maybe call this. Nope. And you'll find like, oh, I can find my flash within this request, right? There's a whole lot of stuff. You can find out the headers. We can find out the env. So I can go over here to request.env. That's still a lot, right? Can I do this? And now we can get to keys, right? We can find out the server's software. We can find out all of this stuff. It's like there's a crazy amount of information here, right? And one of those things that they told us that we have is this. And I'm just going to set this equal to response, or like auth equals this. Now, auth is something that we can get behind, right? Like this is something that I can vaguely read. I can do auth.pp, pretty print. Nope. pp auth. There we go. And now I can see it as like a nice little hash, right? That keeps going. And you'll see, hey, by the way, my name's Nicky Dover, if you're just joining. You can see my name. You can see my email address. You can see, I wonder what this is going to do. This is dangerous. You can see my face. Google just sent that over for us. Cool. And then like a bunch of credentials information that might be helpful. They also have a UID, which is something that if you're doing thank you, Rachel. If you're doing Omniauth and you want to be like, and you want to like use this, you can use this UID as like a unique identifier to save into your database. And then if all you want to do is log in with Google or have like an optional column in your database to log in with Google, this UID is great for that. We're going to be doing this without the UID because I feel like that's easier for our app. So our user, if we remember correctly, takes in a username, an email, and a password, right? Now, if I'm getting back an email address from Google from this Omniauth flow, I can be pretty sure that the person who's using this has access to that email address. So that email address is really all I need for a login. So I can now start writing out kind of the way I want to do things. So I've got this request.env at Omniauth hash, or at Omniauth. So I'm just going to call this Omniauth or whatever equals loop, whatever. And now basically what my workflow, the workflow that I want to do is I want to have if a user is signing in with Google for the first time, I just want to create that user and welcome them immediately. And I'm thinking because we have it in this, this might not be like something that I would do in a regular app, like where I like suddenly have usernames and then I suddenly have people's full names also showing up. But I could do like, I'm just going to do full, out of key of full name. Whoops, did I write that right? Just name. So this is all nested under info, or a few different things. Info works. So I'm actually gonna, like, all the information I need is right here. Info. So I'm gonna now say like, hey, user, I'm going to say email equal to Omniauth out of key of email. Omniauth gives us this bad boy right here. If I call email on it, this will work. And I'll get this email address. Now, this is something I haven't shown you yet that you might find fun. this find or create, like, this would be a good find by, but like I also want to store it into my database with a username and a password, right? Like that's what our database is for. One cool thing about find or create by is that it actually accepts a block for things to do with like with creating it. So I can start being like user.username equals and then I could call something like name, right? And this will only run if it's creating it. If the block won't run if it's just found this email. So this is either going to return the user in the database that matches this, or it's going to create it and grab my name and set that as the username. We also need a password. Rails comes with a helper method for this. Basically, if they're just creating by logging in from Google, they don't need to make up a password. So we can just store something that we hope that nobody can break, right? We ideally just want a big string that nobody would be able to guess, right? So Rails has a helper, secure help, secure random.hex. I'm going to show you what that does. It just gives us something that people are not going to be able to break, right? So I can now just say, hey, user.password equals Omniauth. Oh, no, that's not correct at all. Instead of saying this, because I don't have a password, and it would be really bad if Google would just be willing to send me someone else's password. Hex, not hacks. I was thinking about hacking and writing hex. So here we go. So this ideally should end up with a user, right? And now we can just go, hey, session at a key of user ID equals at user.id. We don't even need to use this right here. We can be like, bloop, 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 bloop. Oh, come on. Uname. Great. Everyone see what I just did here? What's the most confusing part of this?
So when you pass a block into find or create, it'll only run the stuff in the block if it's creating it.
Yes.
No. Okay.
And before saving it. So basically it's like, cool, if you can't find it, use this thing right here to create it, but then also run this and like set these different variables, right?
And if we were taking in that lovely photo that you showed us, we could do that there as well.
Yes.
I mostly just want to see it one more time, you know, that's really it.
Here we go. Bloop. If I had a table, like a place in my database for a
Look at that.
Yeah,
Look at that face.
there we go. I think that's still my LinkedIn. If it's not, it should be. No, I think I changed that to the graduation speech I gave while holding my dog. Okay, I brought my dogs to graduation. They would not leave me alone unless I like held one of them. So that was a thing.
Amazing.
So here we are. We have this. This works. And finally, we can just redirect to posts path. And this should do everything we really want it to do, right? So I'm going to test this out, make sure it works, and that I wasn't just lying to you for the past. This is going to break. Google's finally like, finally, I can stop spinning. But now I go here, log in here. Do I still have a buy bug? Nope. Where is this? Oh, I messed up the routes earlier while I was just playing around. I forgot that I scaffolded this one, so I'm actually going to need all of posts. But if I refresh the page, I'm currently logged in as Nicky Dover. Did I break this in a new way? Don't ever let me just randomly change routes. No, did that work? Oh, that's really slow. What's going on here? We don't really have to examine that right now. But you're noticing that I'm logged in, and I can log out the same way I would normally do it by just getting rid of the session ID. Because once I'm logged in, Google goes away. Google is no longer helpful to us, and the only thing that matters is this line of code right here. That I said, hey, the session user ID is going to be this user's ID, right? And now our auth just works the exact same way it did before. Once we found the user, we just put that baby in session, and then we're good to go, right? Google can leave our app, go back to doing whatever they do, like making us recognize crosswalks or something. But this right here does all of the handling of their request, creates a user if one doesn't exist. We can see that one has been created by going over here to our Rails console and being like, hey, user.last. And you'll see that's Nicholas Dover. I would never write that myself, so you know it would be Google. Should I log in with my Flatiron School email? Yes, my full name is Nicholas. So you'll see like, okay, that worked, right? And now if I go back and I log in again, right? This time it should just find me. I'm gonna like do the Nicky Dover 2 times to like test it. Cool, that works. We can now do this. And you'll notice now it goes up. If it does this, it'll go down, right? So if I log out and then log back in, the next time I click this, it should go down, right? If it goes up, it means I'm a new user. There I go, bloop, bloop. Continue to Omniauth lecture, very fancy. So now this goes down. Omniauth is added to this app. We don't need to do anything else. So the way we did this was we installed this new gem, right? Called Omniauth Google OAuth 2, right? We also like set up an env file so that we had access to these and we weren't pushing them up to GitHub. Is everyone clear on why we shouldn't push things up to GitHub that are like secret client keys? It's because then there's actual bots that are on GitHub all the time crawling for you, Flatiron students, usually, like people who are new to computing, who are new to programming, who are building API calls for the first time, to start pushing up their API keys so that their bots can use them to then hack you. Usually, like for something like this, it's probably not going to be malicious. They'll probably just run out your tokens for Omniauth, but or it will break because we've also set it to only work with a certain URI. But depending on which API you're using, sometimes it'll allow you access to a lot of different things about, like if you're using the Spotify API, who's there to say that they're not going to use your Spotify API to listen to by the crash test dummies 1,000 times. And that would ruin your year in review, right? So that's the reason why we are like, there's probably worse examples like losing your bank account or whatever, but I can't think of them. So now that we have this little thing, we basically followed the instructions, which told us to go into this config, create this initializers, omniauth.rb, use our client secret right here. And then all we needed was to use this link that they gave us to send them to Google. And we've set up on Google's end this little, let's let's see if I can dig this up quickly. We set this up so that when we get, come on now. This is the right, is this the one? I'm very confused as to why it doesn't say the redirect URI we added right here. But we set up a redirect URI to let that work, to send them back, or to first get the request, right, from our website. We're being like, hey, this website, this URL is good to go, and you can redirect, back there. Then we create a route to handle this. That just sent us over to a controller, and then we were back in our regular Rails, and we can start doing cool things. But all we really needed to do was like say, hey, is that email match up to any like user in our database? If so, that's them. Let them in. If not, create a user for them and then let them in. Now, depending on your app, you might have different needs. You might want to be like, actually, what if they do log in with something that we don't have in our database? We want to do something else, right? Like make them sign up. Be like, hey, so I'm going to pass over like the email address, but then I'm going to ask you for a username and some information about yourself. And you could do that, but that's just going back to Rails stuff. Google gave you their email address, their name, things like that. You can also, there's a lot of other things you can request that they send over. Basically, we currently default to saying like, hey, we only want the email and profile information, right? But you can actually be really, really specific, right, with what you want the scopes to be. And if you like spend a lot of time looking through the documentation, you could probably find a way to be like, hey, I want your name, your email address, your very cool LinkedIn profile, and also your like YouTube history. And you will find something in there that will allow Google to let you make the user authorize that. It's a really powerful tool. You can use that to request basically anything from Google. I think that's what they're doing right here, being like, hey, then give me their YouTube history, which is fun and weird. And it'll basically, then it'll just change your like little authorization box to make that work. We all cool with this? All right. So basically we could end the lecture here now. I could show you how to do this with Devise, whichever way you all want. Some of you can stick around for Devise. I'll end this recording now. But basically, this is the end of using Omniauth. This is like, if you did this implementation, this would pass the requirement for your code review. I'm going to stop this recording.